React Native. This is an introduction to React Native. My name is Chris Rittelmeyer. That's me. I look like a Muppet. I have been a UX engineer for the past 5 years, whatever that means. I say whatever that means because I also hire, and when they put UX engineer on their resume, I never know what I'm gonna get. Including me, who knows what they'll get from me. But I'll tell you, mostly JavaScript. I for design, I'm not gonna get mad at you for 1 pixel, but I'll probably ask you to nudge if it's like a 3 pixeler, you know? I'm not too bad, but I lean towards that. Before that, I was an ASP.NET developer for 7 years. Any ASP.NET people out there? All right, woo, yeah. I escaped. I am now JavaScript almost exclusively. I'm also an improviser, been that for the past 9 years. All right, thank you. Has anybody ever been to Dad's Garage? Yeah, cool. Yeah, we do improv here in town, and we have a lot of fun. If you've never seen a Dad's Garage show, come see one. We recently had Badger from Breaking Bad do some shows. If you guys remember, Badger's like the friend, the meth head friend of Jesse's. And before that, earlier in June, we had Colin Mockery, Whose Lines It Anyway fame. Yeah, so he came and did some shows with us. He's a buddy of ours. Okay, that's enough tooting my own horn and showing pictures of me with things. I work for KnowMe. We make devices. Actually, before we were KnowMe, we were Brickstream, and then we bought KnowMe. We make devices that go in the ceilings of buildings and privately and securely and accurately count people. So we are like a clickstream for a store. We can see where you went. We don't know who you are, but we do know that you stood in front of that ad for a really long time, and maybe we can put it together later. Theoretically, you can put it together later with transaction times and say, oh, they bought the thing or they didn't. It's fun. It's a lot of cool technology we're doing there, and that's what I do. That's here in Atlanta. We also have headquarters in New York. Okay, so what is React Native? Well, here on the React Native website, it says React Native enables you to build world-class application experiences on native platforms using a consistent developer experience based on JavaScript and React. The focus of React Native is on developer efficiency across all the platforms you care about. Learn once, write anywhere. I'll say that again later. Facebook uses React Native in multiple production apps and will continue investing in React Native. So a lot of salesy buzzwords, but it's all very true and a nice succinct way to describe what makes React Native great. So I know what you're thinking. Okay, well, it's basically just another phone gap, right? And that is partly true. It does allow you to write JS syntax that ultimately runs natively on these platforms like iOS and Android. So in that way, yeah, it's a lot like PhoneGap, and it's a lot like Famous, and it's a lot like NativeScript, and it's a lot like Titanium and Ionic and Xamarin and steroids. Okay, I get it. Haven't we learned our lesson yet? Well, that's the thing. We have learned our lesson. We've learned quite a few lessons. When I say we, I mean Facebook. They learned quite a few lessons. But we as the human race have learned these lessons. And so yeah, we do have a lot of other options, but React Native is different. This is my favorite slide. And React Native is different, and this is very important because React is different, okay? So I know you guys have already heard about React. Were you guys here at the October React meetup? Anybody by show of hands? Okay, great. So not that many people. What about June? There was another one in June. Okay, great, awesome. All right, so it's both good and bad because React Native is hard to understand without understanding React, but it's also good because I included a lot of React stuff in here too. So we can't go any further without talking about React. That's a really important thing. So what is React? Well, it's a JavaScript library created by Facebook for building user interfaces. It's also touted as being the V in MVC, and because of that, it kind of goes really well hand in hand with existing MVC frameworks. So if you already use Backbone or Angular or Ember, it's quite easy to drop React in piecemeal as the views for your components. It was originally a single framework targeted solely for the DOM. I say originally because obviously it doesn't target that only anymore. We'll get to that too. So yeah, it's a JS library. Originally it was just a standalone core package. I mean, it had libraries, but essentially you had a React.js file ultimately that you would use. But it's much more than that, and that's what I'm really going to try to drive home, is that one of the most important things that React Native, and by extension React, or I guess I should flip that, React and by extension React Native, is a paradigm. It's a new paradigm. The React paradigm is very, very important to understand. And it's got a lot of debatable concepts. I don't know if you guys have heard anything about it yet, but anything you have heard, you've probably been like, well, why are they, you have to separate your concerns, and why they can't put XML inside the JavaScript? What are you talking about? And if you've never heard that before, you're probably thinking, now what? They do that? And yes, we'll talk a little about that too. But it's important. It's important to know that it's a paradigm. It's not just the library. In fact, the library is just one implementation of the React paradigm. In fact, there are already other third-party open source libraries coming up that use the React paradigm, but don't use any of the same code. So React is a paradigm for building user interfaces that are, and I'm just gonna run through these so we can get some code soon, easy to reason about, performant, self-contained, composable, and reusable. And to sort of give you an idea of what I mean by all these things, how does it do these things, let's go ahead and jump and take a quick look at the React architecture. Okay, I'm gonna look at 4 main parts of the React architecture. The first is that it's a state machine. Does everybody know what a state machine is? Kind of yes, no? So it's just it's another paradigm. A state machine is a way of looking at a certain type of machine. If you've ever seen a vending machine is a great example of a simple state machine. It starts in one state, ready to push button. If you press a button, it sends you to another state, ready to select a drink, and then you press another one and put, it's got all these states. And if that sounds familiar, that's probably because every web page you've ever created could be considered a state machine. In fact, if you go back to pre-Ajax days, if anybody remembers those dark ages, we had to submit, if we wanted to get any data to the server and have it re-render something back to us, you had to submit it. You had to post a form back. It would re-render all of its magic on the back end, and then it would send down essentially a string of HTML and plop it on your browser. That was great. Those days were awesome. The thing that wasn't good about that was that the DOM is really slow. So when you did that, you ended up waiting a lot. But the idea is great. The whole idea of if I just change the state up here, then it re-renders everything. You always know what you're going to get. You're not worried about maybe changing something with Ajax and then the server thinks that you're one thing and the front end thinks you're another thing. The server thinks you have 5 unread mail messages and the front end thinks you only have 4, and now we're out of sync and things get weird. So it's a great architecture, but it's just so slow. So anyway, moving on. Unidirectional data flow. This actually goes hand in hand with a state machine. When you have unidirectional data flow, you don't have, it's kind of the same thing that I was just describing. You have data that you set up here, it crunches numbers, computes, and renders to you what it should look like. So you give it an input, it gives you a reproducible output. And which makes things very easy to reason about, as I said up here. Okay. Shadow DOM. Facebook came up with this thing called the Shadow DOM, and there's actually other non-Facebook implementations of the Shadow DOM out there as well. But essentially what it is, they realized at Facebook that, well, they already knew the DOM was really slow, but they realized that they could completely recreate the DOM tree in JavaScript memory, and it was super fast to traverse it, way faster than the DOM. And you'd think, well, really, that's a lot. You're putting the whole DOM tree in JavaScript memory. Yeah, we are, and V8's super fast. And other architectures as well, but V8 is particularly fast at doing that sort of thing. In fact, it can hold 2 shadow DOMs. Often what it does is it'll have a representation of the DOM in memory, and then when you make a change on your page, it generates another representation, diffs the 2, and only changes what you changed. Does that make sense? So it feels to you as if you're re-rendering the whole page every time something changes, but the truth is there's a shadow DOM and it's doing some really smart diffing behind the scenes to only push across the pipes the data that it needs to. So that's another big part of this. And it's very performant. That's where the performant part comes in, because the shadow DOM is super fast. And then JSX, and this is perhaps one of the more, I don't know, people don't like JSX. You guys remember separation of concerns? You all heard separation of concerns when you were being brought up in your developer schools. But HTML is over here, JavaScript is over here, and CSS is over here, and there the twain shall meet, and they all have their own files and everything. Well, Facebook has sort of redefined separation of concerns. What they say, and I think it's kind of more descriptive than prescriptive. They looked at it and said, they looked at all the industry and said, well, are companies really dividing their codes and their coders, more importantly, into silos? Do you really have one person that only knows HTML and CSS, or one that only knows HTML, and one that only knows CSS, and one that only knows JavaScript? The answer is usually no. Usually there's a lot of bleed through. I've been in companies that worked in both ways. I've been in far more companies where you wear a bunch of different hats. So I think they're just trying to be more descriptive of what already exists with that. But what they say is separation of concerns is very important to them, but for them it's not different technologies, it should be different components. Because whenever you want to work on some component, they were so tired of having to open 3 or 4 different pages, a CSS page, HTML, maybe a mustache template or whatever, JavaScript, and so on. They wanted it all to be grouped together. So for Facebook, separation of concerns is separating things by component. And so oftentimes, you'll see things that you wouldn't normally see all on the same page. You'd think that's bad practice. You will actually see them on the same page. And that kind of brings us to JSX. React is a JavaScript library. It can be done in complete pure JavaScript. However, they also provide this syntactic sugar called JSX that basically allows you to put XML inside of your JavaScript page. Why would you want to do that? Well, because they go together. I mean, it looks, I know we spend so much time dividing them, but the truth is, we're working in all of those things at once, all the time. And I'm not going to get too much into the debate. Maybe afterwards, if you guys want to come over and say, HTML should not be in my JavaScript, that's fine, we can talk about it. But rest assured that, or don't rest assured, just know that that's one of the things they offer, and I really enjoy it, actually. So going back to, I had to recently go back and do some jQuery stuff, and I was really sad. Okay, let's see, I think I did everything there. Sorry about that, I'm gonna try to run through here. Okay, we'll do a quick example. So this is a jQuery example that I wrote up. I even did this nice optimization here so that we don't have to keep on looking up this, but that's the only thing good about this code. Presumably we have some boilerplate code like a DOM ready and some HTML somewhere, and we have a component, maybe a link or a button, that has an ID of like, and if you click that button, then you have a couple of things. We call this imperative programming because we're telling it exactly what we want it to do step by step, right? So if it has a class highlight, remove that class and change the text to like. Otherwise, add the class highlight and change the text to unlike. We've all written code like that before or seen it. So here's the same exact example in React. All right, so again, boilerplate code I've left off. This is just sort of the same behavior we were just looking at with jQuery. So right off the bat, yes, we do have some, what looks like HTML, but it's got these strange little eagle braces in the middle of it. That is our JSX. When you break into this eagle brace, you are in JavaScript land. It's expecting an expression though, so you can't just break into regular full if-then. There are ways, but we won't get into that either. But just know that, take a look at this and notice that it's declarative, not imperative. We're not saying, here are the steps to make it look the way I want it to. We're saying, here's how it should look. If the state, and maybe I should have put equals true here just to be a little more explicit, but if the state, the like state is true, then the class is highlight. Otherwise it's nothing. Same thing we were doing before, just declaratively. Same thing down here. The state is like. If like is true, then unlike is our text. Otherwise, like is our text. And finally, we have our on-click event. And again, I know on-click event inside the HTML, we don't do that anymore. And we'll talk about that. And I've got a little ES6 in here, if you guys are wondering what that is. That's just a function. But yeah, so on-click, all it does is this, it just toggles the state. React has a special set state function that you'll use often if you use React, where you go this.setState, give it an object, and it will update the state with whatever's in there. So we're changing our like state to the opposite of its current value. So we're just toggling it. So that's a really simple example, but that kind of gives you an example of the difference in the paradigms there. Here you're just describing how you want it to look. And then anytime you update the state, everything re-renders. That's the biggest thing about React, that's the biggest thing about React. What a weird thing to say. But it re-renders every time you change the state, so. Okay, we're about to jump into some code, but I want to go over some, so that's React. That's the idea of React. I'm sorry that there wasn't more, actually. I thought there would be more of you that had a little bit of experience with it, so I didn't include a whole lot, but that's a brief intro to the React paradigm and how the React code looks. So let's move on to React Native. I'm just going to go through some bullet points, and then we'll look at some code. So a couple things about React Native architecture. It uses Flexbox. Anybody use Flexbox out there? Awesome. Okay, everyone, go look up Flexbox. It'll change your whole world. Even if you're not using React. Most browsers, with polyfills, I think you can get all the browsers you could possibly need that will use Flexbox. Flexbox is a CSS, it's another paradigm really, but its implementation is in CSS currently, and it allows you to just make layouts very easily. So things that you used to have to do with float left and float right and clear both and overflow auto, mostly you can do with Flexbox now. And React Native uses Flexbox. So there you go. Styles, okay, doesn't use style sheets, React Native doesn't. React.js still does, however, they're kind of, maybe one day that won't be true either. You still have styles, you just don't have style sheets. You don't have cascading style sheets. What you have is a style sheet object. So I'll show you what that looks like. That's another bone of contention for many people that look at React. They want, especially if it's a CSS designer, they don't want to have to look at JavaScript. But I don't know. I'll show you some later, and it kind of looks a lot. If you can learn CSS, you can probably learn JSON object with CSS properties in it, but we'll look at that too. ES6, you'll see some ES6 stuff. Anybody know, a lot of people know ES6? Done ES6? Okay, so the ES Next, the latest and greatest JavaScript syntax. React Native does support that. Doesn't require it, but it does support it. We will look at that. The animation architecture for React is fantastic. There's a really great talk out there from the React Europe Conference 2015, if you guys want to look that up. I can post it on the board afterwards, but it's got a lot of great examples of how that works. It uses the native implementations of Android and iOS, or whatever the platform may be, and provides one interface for that sort of thing. So a lot of your animations you can transfer over from one to the other with minimal effort. Bridge architecture. Whenever you compile your Xcode project or your Android project, oftentimes in many of these, like PhoneGap, you have to stop, or not stop, but you recompile in various ways, right? There are lots of, it varies in mileage with how long it takes to recompile these other projects. React Native is very smart with their bridge that they've created from React to the platforms. It only sends up just a little bit of data, the minimal that it has to, and what that makes for is really fast refreshes while you're coding. So it feels like you're coding in a web browser, as if you had, as many of you are used to. We don't like to have to recompile every time we change some code, us web developers. Okay, and then finally, custom native components. It makes it really easy to extend. If you have some Xcode, some Objective-C class that you really like, some iOS component, but they don't have a React Native version of it yet, it's It's really easy to make. You're just essentially mapping functions from that API to functions from an API you'll be building in JavaScript. So it's not that hard, but we're not going to go over it either. Oh, and finally, active open source community. Very active. We'll go over some of the stuff they've built here in a second. Okay, demo. We'll see how I can demo and hold a mic at the same time. Quick disclaimer. I have recently been working almost exclusively in Vim as my editor. So if you see me just stare at the screen, I'm probably thinking of the Vim command that I need to type next. All right. See if we can get this up. Okay, so, great. Go Hawks. Okay, all right, so first thing I want to do is just show you how you would create, I'm just gonna, holding this is gonna be weird. I'm gonna put it down for a second.
You want to try it without? See if it is weird.
You want to try it? Yeah, let's try it. And I'll project for the moment. Okay, so I'm just going to drop into a little temporary directory. Great. And then, if you have React, oh great, yeah, let's just do that. Hello? Testing. Would it work from here? Oh, kind of does. If I do this, I don't know, this is weird. All right. Might help a little bit. Okay, so first you'd install React Native, npm install React Native. There actually probably need, I would go to React Native's website and just go through their getting started. It's great, it's a step-by-step, but ultimately you're npm installing React Native, and you need to make sure to have the latest Xcode. I think Xcode 7 and up is what it requires. So after we've done that, what we would type is React Native init and the name of our project. So for instance, hello world. Now I'm not going to do that because I did it earlier. So let's pretend I did that, and it would say blah 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 creating, and then we'd have a new folder. So let's go ahead and drop into that folder and take a quick look at it.
Chris, can
yes,
you try
sir.
flipping it on you? Apparently it's
Hello, hello. If I just lean this way. I don't think you'll be able to hear me. I'm cooler. Alright, so CD Hello World. Take a quick Can everybody in the back see that, by the way? I just do pointers. Make it bigger. Yeah, I can make it bigger. Hotkeys, anybody?
Command plus.
Command plus.
Oh, seems so obvious now you say it. Cool. Okay, great. So it created all this stuff for us. Mostly what you need to know about are the two directories, Android and iOS. Inside those, you'll have an Android project file and you'll have an iOS project file. Android you open up in Android Studio, and iOS you open up in your Xcode. And then we also have index.android.js and index.ios.js. Okay, so let's quickly just switch over. We're going to open up Xcode. And I've already started it, so I'm kind of running a surprise. Okay, so what we're going to do is just go ahead. I've opened up this file, the Hello World Xcode project, and I'm just going to press play. And what it'll do is it'll build. If you've got any experience with iOS, it doesn't take as long as some compilers, but you know, it's still a compiler, and it does take a few seconds. We got to wait for this to load up and all this stuff. Oh man, what a pain, right? Having to recompile stuff all the time. So as soon as this loads, I'll show you how fast it reloads, if it ever loads. That doesn't look like iPhone 6. See if the demo gods are with me.
If you want the simulator to be smaller, press Command 2 or 3.
Oh, that's what it is. Hey.
Command what?
2 or 3, the command and the numbers.
Oh, it was working. Yay. Okay, so great. This is what we get. Comes up to get started, edit index.ios.js. And then press Command R to reload. That's weird. Does it mean press stop and then restart and then Command R? No, it doesn't. It means press Command R. It's really cool. It's really fast. So if we went and opened up a quick... Oh, great. Let me go to the place we're trying to go. Call it Hello World. And then we will open up the iOS.js here. Okay. So let's go ahead and look at this real quick. So this is our iOS.js code. Quite a few things to take in here. We'll start from the top. UStrict. We are mostly all familiar with what UStrict is and does. Okay, so now we have some, this is the first bit of ES6 syntax. This is called destructuring, assignment destructuring syntax. So essentially what it's doing is, it's a shortcut for import, or what is it? It's like React.app.registry. What is it? Who's my ES6 guys out there? This is the same as import React.app.registry. Oh boy. I'm drawing a
curly
blank.
brace.
What's that?
Import curly brace from React. Okay.
Oh no, I'm just trying to say what this destructuring syntax actually does.
Import app registry from React?
Yes, that's what it is. That's exactly what it is, yep. Import app registry from React, import component from React, and so on. So it's just some shortcuts for doing some common importing things. So basically all we're doing is importing a bunch of libraries here. Okay, next we've got this ES6 class syntax. It's not required, but they are moving in that direction, but they do still have some, if you're not familiar with ES6, you can do this, or hello world equals react.create class. And then it's very similar after that. You'd have a render function and so on and so forth. But I'll try to bust through with the ES6. And hopefully it's not too confusing for those that aren't familiar. Okay, so the main thing that every React component will have is a render function. That's the only thing it's required to have. And that just returns essentially it returns another React component really. But this is where JSX looks really handy because you can do something as simple as, so I mean right now we've got this big view style, but maybe in React.js you might do something like a div. Hello world. And I know that looks really weird because you're returning HTML inside your JavaScript, but it's actually, you get used to it. You get used to it really fast. And we start missing it elsewhere. So that's what we're doing here is we're returning a single component with nested components inside. The view component in React Native is essentially the div component. So if you know what a div is in HTML, that's what a view component is in React Native. And text is like a span. So there's some really loose analogs, but they work a lot the same way. So all we really have here then is a div with a span inside, actually 3 spans inside, and then they've all got styles. Okay, let's take a look at the styles real quick. This is where it gets a little funky. It breaks into this JavaScript syntax with this eagle brace, and then it just refers to this styles object, which is actually defined further below. So that's weird. I know we're not used to that, but it's actually super powerful. CSS is really powerful. We're really used to that. But JavaScript, what's great about making your styles in JavaScript is that you have the power of JavaScript behind it. So there aren't a whole lot of libraries out there yet that are making this part any easier or behave any differently. But they're coming. I mean, they've got to be. It's JavaScript. So anything that you can do with JavaScript, any of your Lodash functions, for instance, you can now use on these style objects. So if you need to extract, maybe you have a single source of truth for colors or sizes or something like that, and you need an easy way to extract a deeply nested style of some sort, you could do that using Lodash because all of your styles are in JavaScript. And then finally, the last little line here is what starts our app up. It gives it an entry point. So we're just saying, here's the name of the component, that's registering it with Xcode, and then we're giving it this function as a return, as a second parameter that returns our hello world code. Okay, I know that's a lot, especially if we don't have a lot of React experience. That's just probably way too much. But I want to pull this up. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up the Android version. That was the iOS JavaScript version. And if I go React, hello world, index.android.js. Oh boy. Sure, let's recover it. Okay. So can you guys see what the differences are between those two? If you It's the exact same. It's the exact same. Now, the only difference obviously being the text up there. One says, oh, I had already changed them to hello world. Originally they said, this is iOS, go to this file and change it. And the other one said, this is Android, go to this file and change it. But that's it. That's the difference. Now, that's not always going to be the case. Remember I mentioned the adage, or not adage, the little saying, write once, what did it say? Write once, deploy anywhere. No, that's the old one, sorry. Write once, deploy anywhere, Facebook believes is dead. They don't think that works. You can't write in one language and deploy to all these native platforms. But what they do say is, learn once, write anywhere. So you learn one language, you learn the React paradigm, and you can take that to React iOS, React Android, React DOM, which they are working on, and actually a lot more, which I'll show you a list of in a little bit. So it's really a powerful way to get better developer efficiency out of your team. I actually did a project last year. I did a React.js project. It wasn't a React Native project, but we spent about a year on the project, and it was just so much fun, so easy to do code review, so easy to review people's PRs, because I almost felt like I wrote every component I looked at, because it was just so familiar to me already. We played a lot of Lodash golf. Where's the Lodash? A lot of Lodash golf. A lot of, you could have made this a plug instead of a map, but whatever. It was fun. And yeah, so this is kind of the coolest, this is one of the coolest things right here, is that the code is exactly the same. Now as soon as you start getting into some more platform specific things like the Navigator iOS, you don't have the same, it's not the same. The navigation between Android and iPhones are so fundamentally different that to try to have one component that worked in both would be, I mean, maybe you could try it, I don't know, but it seems like we've tried certain things like that before and we've fallen flat with that. So we're avoiding that. So that is that. I guess the last thing I wanted to show you is that, well, yeah, that it does indeed work in Android as well. So here's the same thing. So if I were to go, oh, and I wanted to show you how fast. So let's see. Change 2 words. Oh yeah. Oh wait, is that right? Oh, that's the iPhone. Oh, oops. Oh, did I not even? Oh, is this? That's it. Oh. How did we do this, Andre?
Function F2.
What is it?
Function F2.
Function F2. That's right. Reload.js.
Boom.
Vim, and that was instant. So, yeah, I know. I will suddenly want to make apps, mobile apps. That's basically the end of my demo. I just wanted to show, I guess, one more thing, and that is these things. These are some things that the community is already creating. Obviously, iOS, Android, and DOM are Facebook created, but all these other ones are getting created by the community. And what I mean, so React Canvas, SVG, R3, Famous Plus, what I mean by that is you can write React code and target these other platforms. You can have you can write an app, write a component in React and have it target to Canvas, or SVG, or 3D.js, or even Famous, another framework that ostensibly does a very similar thing. You can actually target it. Anybody know what Blessed is?
Cuts
Oh,
up your
it's-
CSS.
What's that?
Cuts up your CSS.
Cuts up your CSS?
Yeah.
Oh, I was referring to something else. Maybe it's Blessed with an exclamation point is different, but it's this command line. You can basically write really cool, like terminal point-click draggable mouses, which, since I'm just switching to Vim, I'm really excited about the terminal lately. But anyways, so yeah, you could write a React component that outputted to a terminal app, which just blows my mind. I wish I could have had a demo ready for that. And that's it. That's basically it. That's the intro to React Native. I think I covered most things. If other people are out there that know, yes, let's do questions.
So like, PhoneGap has, I don't know, 800, 900 plugins to talk to every single different component of your phone and whatnot in 20 different ways or whatever.
Yeah.
What about React?
We're not there yet. We're not there yet, but we're way younger. What's that?
To me, that's totally useless then. Because if I can't use a barcode plugin, if I can't use a camera, if I can't use any sort of accelerometer or anything like that in an app, really?
Yeah, sure.
Why would I
Totally.
use React?
Totally, I agree. Well, so first of all, the ones you named actually probably would already exist by now. Accelerometer, for
Sorry,
instance.
I haven't had a beer yet today, so I'm sorry. I'm a little punchy.
No, not at all, not at all.
An adapter, so you can use any Cordova plugin, this is your in React Native to help solve that problem.
Exactly.
Like the Microsoft. So Google
That exists?
it does. It's there on GitHub. I'd love to hear your feedback about it.
Oh, actually, when I was thinking about the question, I wonder if there was like it'd be just a shame to lose all those plugins.
Yeah, so Google for Cordova plugin React Native. Contact GitHub project.
Yeah, so yeah, I would three-pronged answer. One, what he said. Two, there are so many getting made every day. Most of the more common ones that you've heard of, probably someone has something out there. And then my third response would be, make one. Please help the community. They're really easy to make. Yes, sir, in the back. You'd like to go ahead.
Yeah, so you input stuff, really has JavaScript project. Is there any way you can use like CSS modules in React Native or?
CSS modules and React Native?
Yeah.
I don't know. I would say absolutely yes. I mean, if it can be ported to JavaScript, it can be ported to React Native. So if you already have some JavaScript modules written in JavaScript that help with that sort of thing, then the answer is almost certainly yes, it can be used here. But to really answer your question, I don't know. I don't know if that exists yet. Yes, sir.
So, if someone knows Swift and Java already, Android and iOS, what factors would lead them to use React Native instead of using Xcode, which is amazing, and Swift? Like, why would you switch to React Native? Or is it just for people who are starting to learn those platforms and just don't want to switch to another language?
It can be both. I mean, largely it is if you already know JavaScript, hey, now you can write mobile apps too. I mean, that's one of the biggest draws for sure. But to answer your question, if you had the time and the wherewithal to learn one language that unites them all, rather than having to switch gears all the time. Now, again, like it's not always going to be the case. You'll probably just want to supplement your mobile apps in that way. Maybe you're writing simpler things, and then when you need to get something deeper that there is no plugin for, yeah, go back to your knowledge of Xcode and write some more bridge code that way. Or write a completely different class and just make them integrate in that way. But the answer to your question is probably, it's mostly for people that already know JavaScript and want to be able to easily write mobile apps. But also it's just a way of saying, well, I don't want to write Java and Swift and Objective-C all the time. I'd like to stay in one realm. It's good for that. I mean, of course, then there is the learning curve, but once you've made it past that, I think the developer efficiency that you get from it is really beneficial. Yes, sir.
So when you go, I noticed like when people start switching to one particular thing, they're going to write everything in, then your code editor that you're working in just throws up all over it, and there's no syntax highlighting for any of it. That at least maybe not, there's like for one language you'll have syntax highlighting. The rest of it's just gone. Do they have any kind of syntax highlighting?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I don't know what you guys run, but WebStorm, Sublime Text both have JSX syntax highlighting.
Okay.
Vim has syntax highlighting.
So it would be JSX.
JSX is probably what you're looking for your syntax, yes.
What do you do about testing?
So there are a couple ways. Facebook has a test framework called Jest that is based on Jasmine. It's actually really smart too. It does really cool stuff. It auto mocks everything by default. So unless you explicitly say don't do this, it's going to mock it, which we should be doing. We should all be mocking our unit tests, or at least the dependencies for our unit tests. So that's the quick answer, easy answer. But we actually got it. We were testing. Well, actually, this doesn't necessarily apply to React Native, but React.js we were testing with Mocha. There are plenty of plugins for getting your favorite expect or should or whatever your favorite syntax is for testing. There are a lot of libraries out there to make that simpler. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
How long did it take you to kind of put this together? Like, did you have no exposure to Xcode before, and you figured it out?
I had a little bit of exposure to Xcode before, but I didn't need any. I mean, you really didn't. I mean, I know I kind of skimmed over what we said. I was like, oh, what I did? Oh, I pressed enter here, and then it worked. Trust me. Well, it really did. I mean, it kind of works right out of the box. I opened up Xcode. I pressed play. If you can find that play button, that's really all you need to know. That and how to stop it, and then you switch back over to your JavaScript. Now, will that always be the case? Probably not. If I write a really deep, complex app, I'm sure there's going to be times where I'm going to need to dig deeper. But for 90% of the cases, you don't have to know anything about code. And to go along with that, right before this meeting, I was scrambling to try to get the Android demo running. And Andre, thank you very much, Andre, helped me get that done. I've never touched Android. I've never opened up Android Studio before. He can attest, I didn't even have all the things I needed to get it working anyway. So, and that's up and running. So, other questions? Yes, sir, Andre.
So let's go do like the native part of it. So when I write in the iOS file and I write in the Android file and I do like text view.
Text view?
Any kind of like text view or whatever, like in the Android. Do I get the Android text view that appears in the Android app?
Yes,
right?
yes, you get the native text view. It's not a web view wrapper. That was like, they really didn't want to do that. They needed those native speeds at Facebook. They're going for 60 FPS everywhere, all the time, across all of their platforms. And this was the only way they could see to do that currently. So, yes, sir.
Is Facebook writing their apps and are they like rewriting Facebook?
They've rewritten and are rewriting parts of it, not all of it. Kind of depends on what they need. The reason they made React, if you guys remember, I don't know, 2009 I think, there was a bug that was like a month in Facebook where you'd have you have 6 inbox messages, and then you go and click it and like, oh no, I don't. I've already read all these. It says I have unread messages, and you had all these people that were really upset because they thought that 6 new people wanted to talk to them, but really their mom again. And people were really upset about that, so they had to fix it. So this was actually the way that they were able to do that, because it got rid of this spaghetti code of one component sending a message to the server, which cascades and then sends another message to a different component. And now these two components aren't really in sync and know what's going on, and you have all these different messages going back and forth. So that's what it was set up to solve. And now I've forgotten what your original question was. Oh, is Facebook using it? Yes.
In their app.
Yes. Instagram, I think is React people who are out there. It's all written in React now, or just most of it, something like that.
I know the mobile web one is written in React, and the desktop web one. I'm not sure about any of the actual apps.
Yeah. So, but it is out there. It's in the wild. My favorite recent example is Netflix. If you guys watch Netflix and you've seen the new UI on that, they started doing A/B testing this summer, and by now it's all switched over. You've got a new UI for Netflix than you had a year ago. That's all in React Native. So go home and watch some movies tonight and then write it off as doing real work because you're studying. Any more questions? Yes, sir.
The question is more about React, actually.
Sure.
So I saw you earlier writing both JavaScript and HTML at the same time, right? Yes. So can I write CSS as well?
No, because I'm not actually writing HTML. It's actually JSX, which is very specific. It's a sort of a subset of HTML, or maybe I guess a superset, since it adds things that weren't there before. But no, you can't just throw style sheets.
So you have to create separate.
Yeah, you'd still have a separate style sheet, but that's for a web React.js project. Currently, yeah, you'd still have a separate style sheet. However, if you notice, we're making a styles object in React Native, and one of the things that they're going to do, they've already done it. They split React into React and React DOM. It used to be that all the DOM functionality was in one file with React.js, but since they've extracted sort of the React Paradigm out to its own library, they've got React DOM, React iOS, React Android, and React DOM. Ultimately, what they're going to head towards is styles objects in React DOM as well. So ultimately, you will have the option of not using cascading style sheets in your web components. Someone in the back, Heather? Yes, sir.
So any pain points that you know, thing you didn't like to see done better in the future?
Yeah, there's some pain points. We did a project, took a year, and I would say 90% of what we wrote was awesome because 90% of what we wrote was for displaying view stuff and behaviors. I had a really cool map component, a lot of cool animations and visualizations that worked great with it. Pain points right now are data flow. If you've heard of Flux, Flux originally was just another paradigm that Facebook said, here, this is how it should work. We haven't written anything for it yet. So someone else do that, but here's what we're thinking it should work. And then, so you've got Reflux and Redux and all these out there that attempt to do that. And then more recently, Facebook has come out with GraphQL and Relay and that whole thing, which is actually a Flux implementation. It's a simplified version of a Flux implementation. But that was definitely a pain point. I think if I could do that again, we ended up writing our own, and it wasn't that good. So that was definitely a pain point. Data flow. Another one was probably just how big we tried to make it. We tried to make everything, the whole site, from top down in React, and we tried to replace certain models and controllers we already had all at once. If I would go back now, I would probably start with the leaves of what we had and just write components that way and sort of let it, which is another thing it's really good for. If you are going to try to switch existing code over to React, I would highly recommend starting with the leaves, starting with a small component. Maybe you have, I don't know, if you did have a like button in your Facebook, maybe you start with replacing just the button part, and then you have the text part, and now you can combine those into a full like button, and then maybe combine that with a text box into a comment box component, so that you can kind of work your way up to the branches. Does that answer your question? Those were probably the two biggest ones that we had. Any other questions out there? Okay, great. I'll be up here if anyone has any questions. We can jump on here and hack around if you'd like to, and I will post some resources on the meetup website after this is all done. So thank you very much, guys.